I just want to say thank you. There were some really powerful points and perspectives that you brought up in regards to storytelling and just sort of reframed some of the storytelling process. So yeah, that was really powerful.
Very well. Today we're going to speak about how to write a book. I am Dennis Ross. I am the founder of bookambition.com, located in Atlanta, Georgia. We do three things. We write books for thought leaders across the globe. We teach a class called Narrative Engineering, Narrative Construction in Silicon Valley, working with startups to design their pitch presentation, design the narrative, the story that is going to beckon investment to come into their particular endeavor. And then also we work with established enterprise, established companies in the US in designing stories for their services and products before they actually take it into the marketplace to sell. So we work on books, we work with startups, and we work with companies who understand that storytelling is the sharpest knife to cut through today's noise. I can only assume the professionals here with me today are here because you have either considered writing a book or in the process of writing a book and really are trying to just swim through the murky waters of exactly how it is done. Many of us have great ideas, but we have not the skill, the time, the story crafting, the ability to put together a lucid 200-300-page book. Many people can write 2 or 3 pages that are wonderful, but then what? What do we say after that? So today I would like to clarify 5 points of the writing process. What should your book be about? What is your angle of expression? Do you understand storytelling? How to organize your ideas? A book establishes your credibility in your absence. A book establishes your credibility in your absence. Most of the individuals, if not all on this conversation, for whatever profession you are involved in, understand that if you can get in front of somebody and have a one-on-one interpersonal conversation, the probability of success, you reaching the outcome, the objective you are seeking, goes through the roof because you have a great personality, you're engaging, brilliant ideas, all of that. So the problem is never if you can speak to someone one-on-one. The problem is 99.9% of the people we need to speak to, we will never meet. So what a book does is it transports your personality from where you are because of that time-space continuum limitations and takes you across the world and establishes a conversation where you are not. That's number one. It establishes your credibility. It seeds your personality in your absence. What else does it do? Writing a book creates not just a reader, it creates a fan. Now, this may seem peripheral to our point, but this is one of the central points of the entire discussion today. We have entered, I talked about this the last time I spoke in Silicon Valley at the marketing conference at Microsoft. We have entered into the fan economy. I know that may sound odd, but do you know that if you are trying to secure clients and customers, you're working on a model that is about to go away? If you are seeking clients and customers, that world has quickly and is quickly moving out of sight. Companies from Apple to Facebook, from HP to all of the tech companies I've worked with, understand, from Google, everyone else, they are trying to create fanhood, not customer base. Let me tell you the power of creating a fan by way of writing a book. We're still talking about why you should write a book. Here's an example. You can look at the screen for a second. I am a customer of Verizon, but I am not a fan. It's one of the reasons I had all the technical difficulties this morning, all this stuff, connectivities and stuff. I'm a customer of Verizon, but I'm not a fan. If Sprint gives me a better deal this afternoon, I'll jump off this class, go change my plan because I have no loyalty. However, I am a fan of Stevie Wonder. And if Stevie Wonder comes to Atlanta tonight and the tickets are $500, my response is not to go find a cheaper concert because fans are apathetic to price. And the only way you can establish a fanhood is if you're able to Communicate with them in your absence so your presence has a greater value. Let me say that again. What a book does, establishes your credibility in your absence. It creates a fan in your absence so your presence has a greater value. So whether you are a professor, whether you are a writer, whether you are a consultant, whatever you are, you must allow me to assemble my thoughts and opinions about you without you being there. So when you show up, I say, there's a book. That's him. Look, that's him right there. Man, I love that book. So I come to you as a fan, and whatever you charge, $100 an hour, $1,000 an hour, it doesn't matter, because I consider it to be a privilege to be in the presence of the person for whom I have assembled and knitted together a grand opinion in his absence, on my lunch break, on vacation, as I'm sitting by the fireplace reading. I have done all of this and you're sitting in Toronto. When I see you, I'm a fan. What do I need to do business with you? A book creates fanhood, establishes your personality in your absence, and companies and individuals who will be successful in the future will establish fans, not customers and clients. Apple does not have any customers. Apple only has fans, which is why they can sell a $5,000 phone and 1 million people would buy it. But Nokia cannot do that. So the difference between a company and another company, and as it has how it relates to books and marketing and all of that, has to do with making sure that you can transport who you are, the sentiment of your heart, mind, soul, and spirit, and you're not there so that when you show up, price is no object. Let's move on, because I can stay there. What should you write about? What should you discuss? Now, let me say this right through here. This discussion today, how to write a book, is one discussion within a series of online classes I teach. I teach how to build a story, which is largely for a lot of CMOs, marketing execs, C-level executives come to that class because it is talking about storytelling in granular detail for the organization, okay? How to build a story, how to write a book, how to tell stories and add copy. These are different elements, but they all have connectivity because they all center on storytelling in the center. The forms change, the method changes, but it's all about storytelling, okay? How to write a book. It's about storytelling. So you understand why you should write it. You understand what it does in today's fan economy. So what should you write about? Should I write about my personal life? Should I write about how I grew up and was born in a swamp and raised by mosquitoes? Should I talk about how, I went from poverty to this and, that whole story? Should I talk about how in my inventions and I went through this entire stage where my company was unsuccessful and then all of a sudden we became, what is the subject matter? So there is no specific answer to that question that applies to everyone. But what does apply to everyone is we have entered into the age of meaning. We have entered into post-pandemic, a requirement by the public for you to be real. We're not interested in hearing about, actually, may sound odd. We're actually not interested in talking about how you built this giant company, Boo, and how successful you are and the 5 homes you have all over the world. We don't care. When you write your book, what we want to know is, how did you get through that dark night? See, what we want to know, and we're happy you're successful. We're happy. We're wonderfully congratulating you, Vanessa and Hazel, for all you've done and all the success you've reached. But what we want to know is, how did you make it to the morning on that night? Now, you may say that's a pretty big philosophical statement. Well, you only know what your night is. I don't. So you must write about the thing that almost took you out and learn how to make that hybrid between your personal story and your professional story, so a person can arrive at their opinion of you from a standpoint of inspiration, from understanding that Okay, this guy didn't just do this. Wow, he went to Harvard, he got his MBA there. Of course he's successful. People want to know, how did you survive, man? Now, in that, we don't want a pity party because we don't want to read one. We don't want to go to a pity party. We simply want you to be real, and we want you to write about those things that maybe you told yourself only you and God would know, things you take to the grave. Writing, I've done this for 20 years, and at some point I still feel the chill bumps on my back or my neck, so let me calm down. Writing requires honesty, the brutality of honesty. You can't be cute with it. If you're going to write a book and just say, well, you know, I went to a few things and then had a few down years, but then everything worked out and everything was, don't write that book. If you're going to write a book in today's world, now more than ever before, you must be willing to go there. And I say that because most people say, these authors come in for me to write their books and they say, you know, yeah, I'm willing to go there. I'm like, that's not it. How about there? I'm like, what is there? So there is that place that's underneath the place that you're willing to talk about. You know, we all have this operational story about who we are, where we've come from, and we tell a few things. If you're unwilling to take that lid off and go beneath that to the stuff that really makes you uncomfortable, if you're unwilling to talk about those things that threaten your reputation, if you're unwilling to talk about those things that no one really knew about you that aren't pretty, if you're unwilling to take off the cape and stop making the world think you're just the greatest and talk about the times maybe you were not the greatest, don't write a book. You'll be wasting your time and wasting your money. I tell people sitting right here in front of me who want to write a book, I go down this entire list. If you're unwilling to really tell it all, don't tell any of it. And here's a secret of great writing from a literary perspective. Here is the reward the world gives you. When you're willing to tell it all at that exact moment, you no longer have to. Why do I say that? Stay calm, Dennis, stay calm. Okay. What should your book be about? Let me just say, now this goes into the storytelling seminar I teach, so I'm just gonna bring a little bit in here and we'll get back to the other three, 4, and 5 points. Writing is the ultimate acid test because it is not that you have to lay out everything that you've gone through, all the gory things in your life, it's not that. Rather, it is writing from the perspective where you're not hiding so that all you have experience is able to jump into the mundane things you say. This is what I mean. You step onto an elevator, Hazel, in a building in downtown. And when you step onto the elevator, somebody is on the elevator already. You say, good morning. And they say, good morning. Now, imagine, God forbid, you had been addicted on a substance for 20 years, and by the grace of God, you were brought out. And let's think the person on the elevator was also addicted to drugs for 20 years, and now he's sober. You say good morning, he says good morning. You turn around and you look at the buttons and say, wow, he's been there. How do you know that? He didn't tell you that. You know it because the cave has a language. The night has a language, a tone, a pathos. And when you've been there, you hear it in good morning. When you write your book, you have to approach the writing. I'm going to tell it all. I'm going to give it all. I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to put myself on the line. I'm going to bleed. And as soon as you decide to make that decision, the reward is you no longer have to tell it all because all will jump in good morning. Have you ever opened a book and you're reading something that's rather mundane and you're like, but I feel something. You feel it. You feel it because the person writing the book was approaching the page, not from how much can I hide, but how much can I tell? I'm willing to lay it out because a book is going to outlive you. Your book is going to be here longer than you. It is the only time you'll be able to write your obituary and read it instead of having it read for you. A book is the only thing that you're going to be able to write that explains everything that you really believe, everything that you really think, everything that you want someone to know, children, family, the world, the business, or whatever, and still be around to see its effect, that will still be around when you're not here to see its effect. When you approach a book, whether it's about your personal story, your professional story, or a hybrid of both, with the right attitude, the right spirit of transparency, and the right angle of expression, which is our next topic 3, angle of expression. The right angle of expression, you will be surprised at how many things you don't have to say, but how many things are still heard. How to write a book. You write it honestly. You write it full of transparency, full of a willingness to show your scars. And here's the other piece of that. Do you know the greatest cover is honesty? Because the more honest you are when I'm reading your book, I actually don't think about you, Vanessa. When you tell me what you have gone through and you tell me how you built your business, how you were the first in your family to ever go to college, or how you went through with no funding and put 2 dimes together and made this, and how you've become this great success, and you tell me the real truth, not the there, but the there, you talked about the real story, not that you had some rough nights, but that you lived in your car. Not that you lost some relationships, but that you went through a divorce that almost killed you. When you go there, here's the magic. I don't think about you, I think about me. When you're honest about your story, at the level of brutality, at the level of, this makes me cringe to open this book. The crazy thing about it is the mind shows us. I don't even think about your divorce. I don't think about what you went through. I don't think about those nights you spent in the backseat of your car because you didn't have a place to live, and how you took a shower in the YMCA. But look at you. I don't think about that. I immediately think about, wow, she's been there. And I think about what I went through to get to where I am. I think about, so the greatest cover is to be more, is so honest that it hurts. Because when you do that, your reader comes to you at your book signing with tears in their eyes, not because they learned about your life, but you gave them words for their life. That's the power of a book. And when I have words from my life, yes, I want you to be my attorney. Yes, I want you to be my consultant. Yes, I want you to design my house, because I am a fan, because you have released, you have become the person that unmuted my silence. And now I use your book to represent my life, even though your book has nothing to do with my life. You're talking about yours. That's the power of writing a book for the purposes we mentioned, and how you should write it, what you should talk about, your personal life, your professional life. When you, let me say this last thing as it relates to angle of expression, because we just moved on to angle of expression I didn't really notify you, but we did. When you have a subject matter, I wrote a book for a biochemist some time ago. I'm writing a book now for an Olympian, 2-time gold Olympian, and have written books for just so many business and thought leaders over the years. One thing that I have noticed is when the subject is scientific or analytically bent to begin with, talking about angle of expression, you have to make sure that you do not overstory story. The problem with some people's books is it becomes this great story. It's mushy, it's emotional, and all that stuff, but I don't really leave with anything but some smiles or something. When you have a very emotional story, you must lean away from story and lean into some type of curriculum path or some type of sequence that I can discern from the story, steps, principles that you use to make your decisions. How did you grow the roots in your decision tree? What can I apply to my particular life based on how you made decisions in yours? You can't just talk about eating apple pie, riding on the beach, and having beautiful trips and balloons and birthday parties. And if your whole book is just about, I cannot use that to learn anything. But within the story, if you lean away from story crafting, when the story is already full of wonderful craft, and lean into showing me how, more of a pedantic approach of how I made decisions. And on the other side of that is when you have a scientific, like the book For the Biochemist, when you have a subject matter that is talking about the molecular structure of the body, or talking about some type of medical subject that is highly technical, that is when you must infuse into such subject matter a greater level of story so that it already leans towards the curriculum, the bullet point, and I'm pulling it towards a narrative so I can still stand to read this instead of thinking I'm reading a textbook. I'm still learning the sequence of your ideas within the story. And when I start with the story, I lean into the bullet point area of storytelling. Does this make sense? Or giving someone a baseball field. When you have a baseball field, you have to make sure it has some bases, okay? You have to give somebody, it can't just be a wide field, and the opposite is true. Let me just pause here and ask if there are any questions, because I feel like I'm just going. Tell me if there are any questions so far before I move on to, do you understand storytelling? So I went over why you should write a book. What should your book be about? The personal, the professional, the hybrid of both. The angle of expression, which deals with how you are. Oh, we have another individual admit, Daniel just came in. The angle of expression, which deals specifically with how you are telling your story. How you are telling your story, the angle of expression, transparency, vulnerability. Are you telling your story from a third person? Are you narrating your story from a distance? Talking about something that happened over there? Are you going to be the first person in your story talking about something that happened here? Or are you bold enough and have enough courage to use the most powerful way of telling a story, which is introspection, which is telling it from the thoughts you're having inside of you because you have not the words or the courage to even express. Have you ever thought about something internally and said, how should I say this? Here's the trick. Say it the way you thought it, not the way you're going to edit it before you speak it. When you're writing a book, you want to write from the angle of expression of transparency, vulnerability, introspections, giving voice to that internal voice. And lastly, let me say this about the angle of expression, then I'll open it up for some questions. Do you know why a Marine sniper is so accurate? Why we hold the military snipers, it's like, wow, these guys are just phenomenal. It is not because they can shoot, because that's a split second. It is because they know from where to shoot. They spend all day getting in position to shoot from the proper angle to advance their skill so it can be most effective. It's not the shooting, it's from where you shoot. It is not how you tell your story, it is from where you tell it that's going to allow you to land accurately. Angle of expression, the angle of honesty, the angle of transparency, the angle of vulnerability, the angle of introspection, giving voice to the internal voice before you edit it and put it on paper so people can feel the raw, real candor of your thoughts and your ideas. Okay, let me stop for a couple of questions before I get too far.
Mr. Ross, if I may. So the last point you made, from where you tell, do you also teach a course or a seminar in identifying what the story should be for individuals?
Yes, I do. Yes. And those are usually, so I teach a broader course in that. But most of the individuals who want to dig into their story so we can really, from a granular perspective, find out, because many people have 50 things they can talk about. The challenge is, which one do we pick? Or which 5 do we curate into one? And so I usually do that from a one-on-one perspective. And we've done it in a class before, but It has been most effective when I'm able to deal one-on-one with an individual and really uncover through a series of interviews the story diamonds in their own life. What that means, the story diamond in your personal story, are those elements of your life you have forgotten because they're buried so deep, you have lost sight of their value, just like a real diamond. And so most people, if they say, but what do? You give them the operational explanation about what you do and where you come from. Guess what? That's not the story. The story is buried so deep, covered by dirt and time, that you have forgotten the brilliance of that point. The interview process is to excavate the story diamonds in your life so that we know what you should really talk about. How about you, Hazel, Vanessa? Tell me if you have any questions or any comments so far.
That's really interesting that you talk about excavating the story. I don't know if anyone's read Stephen King's On Writing. He talks about digging up dinosaur bones. So, you start digging and maybe you uncover like the tip of a bone, and then you start digging more and you uncover like, maybe part of the skull or maybe part of the tail or something. You just keep going until you have like the whole dinosaur. But I wanted to also ask a question about the angle of expression. It sounded like you were suggesting to introduce some juxtaposition into the story. So if you have a technical story, juxtapose that with something that's a little more story driven or emotional and personal. And if it's the opposite, if it's a little more personal, then juxtapose that with a more technical angle. And you can kind of create sort of tension there for the reader.
Excellent summary, because you're absolutely correct. You must juxtapose stylistically. This is more story crafting. You must pull a story in the opposite direction to create that tension. That is why when Stephen King, who's obviously one of our most celebrated writers, that is why when he's writing a story that's based in horror, he introduces love and amity between people. It is not just a story of scare. What makes it scary is the relationships that are established, relationships of trust with someone who shouldn't be trusted. So in other words, the juxtapositioning, it goes in many different directions. When we're dealing with technical issues, when I'm writing a book for someone it's about someone's genotype and phenotype, or about epidemiology, or whatever it may be, well, you can learn that in a textbook. So we introduce stories about individuals who are struggling with certain things in their lives, and into that pour the author's particular perspective, whether it be treatment, whether it be research, so that you can see the research within the confines of an individual, a person, a life that you care about, versus, hey, if you want to increase your nutrition, eat this. It's like, wow, that's what this book's about? Not interested. But if you tell me a story about someone who almost lost their life and changed their diet based on this curriculum that this particular professional has, and I learned about that person, boy, that person kind of reminds me of me. I know someone like that. I get it. Now I'm able to read the bullet points of your particular prescription from the confines or from the angle of caring about the individual you're speaking about. So you are absolutely correct, Hazel. Vanessa, do you have any comments?
So I guess I'm coming at this from a different perspective, just reading sort of your background and what you specialize in. And although I would like to write a book one day, I lead an organization called the Utility 2030 Collaborative, and I'm really looking at how to infuse more storytelling into what we're doing, because it's so important. It's about, carbon reduction. Utilities are faced with all of these challenges and they don't quite know how to make those things happen. So I don't know. I took some notes. I really liked talking about the fan economy, not customer based anymore, and utilities are fighting for that. So that's really the perspective I'm coming from. I'm learning from this, so I appreciate it.
Yes, very well, very well. And I totally know where you are when we meet with companies that are attempting to take the inanimate objects they service, or whether it be a service that has no emotions at all, and they're trying to infuse into that storytelling. We teach processes of storytelling that allows the utility company, allows a manufacturer to create an emotive response from a consumer. And we do this through, and this is not in our course today, but I'll just tell you a little bit about this, Vanessa. We do this through a process called emotional misdirection. Emotional misdirection and emotional redirection is establishing a story outside of anything you do, and then having the fan, the customer, the viewer, credit back to your company only at the very end that story that has impacted them came from you. See, the problem or the mistake many companies make or individuals make is trying to figure out, how do I tell a story about this coffee cup? How do I tell a story about these shades? What the answer is, you don't. You establish a story. You see this with Google Brands. You see this with the latest Charles Schwab commercial, where the guy's just talking about not the functionality of the Charles Schwab software, not the brokerage fees. That's the customer and client economy. The fan economy has him on screen now saying, my dad was a handyman. I saw him treat people right and charge, those who didn't have any money, fees that they could afford, because in his mind, he thought if you didn't have money, you still should be able to have quality goods for your family. He charged $100 where everyone charged $400. He went and worked and did a lot worse than he could have done because he cared about people. Now, the whole commercial is him talking about how his dad treated those who didn't have anything and used his carpentry skill to give them high-level furniture, high-level goods that they couldn't afford. And at the very end of the commercial, he basically says, I hope I can be like my dad one day. And then boom, Charles Schwab. You're like, that's a Charles Schwab commercial? Emotional redirection, misdirection pulls you into a narrative that has nothing to do with the company or the service necessarily. Google Brands did it with the Coda commercial, which I did a review on YouTube. I was brought in to do the whole review about why did Coda, the child of deaf adults, why was that such a powerful commercial? Because it had nothing to do with Google, but you credited to Google for making you as emotional as you were. So we can talk more about that, Vanessa, how that is done more specifically with enterprise, how you create a narrative, how do you step away from your brand and create a narrative that elevates your brand by not talking about your brand. One of the things I will say as it relates to storytelling is one of the greatest misconceptions when I'm teaching these classes is this. People think when you talk about story, writing a book, that form of story, or ad copy or marketing or anything that's customer facing, Vanessa, people think it has to do with emotions and crying and being sad. And well, that's not our business. We're not trying to, that's because you don't understand story, ma'am, sir. Storytelling has nothing to do, great storytelling in the form of a book, form of a marketing campaign, in the form of anything that's customer facing, B2B, B2C, has nothing to do with making the person cry emotion. That's pedestrian, has nothing to do with that. The greatest emotion, please write this down. Woo. The greatest emotion is understanding. When you write your book, when you tell your story, when you put together a marketing campaign that is narrative based, what you're seeking is not to make someone cry, laugh. You're seeking for them to notice he gets it. She gets it. And because we are so infrequently understood, finding someone or something or a service that really gets what you're going through makes you cry or makes you appreciative or makes you laugh. Those elements of those sensory elements, the sensory consequences is an outgrowth of understanding. When you put together a narrative for your company or for your book, you're seeking for the person to read and say, wow, man, he did it. For someone to look at your commercial about your office chairs, about your clothing brand, for them to say, wow, they get it. You didn't talk about the stitching on your jacket. You didn't talk about your buttons or the quality of your workmanship of your shirt. You just want, through story. During the pandemic, there was a great, great commercial written by a great storyteller. This is right when we were all quarantined, sequestered, whatever you want to call it. It was a commercial on food. An older British woman with a wonderful accent was telling the story about her food, and you can order it and make it at home. We were all sitting at home. I'll never forget it because I was literally in the kitchen and it came on the screen when I said, when I heard the last time, I just screamed. I was like, somebody got it. I just screamed because at the end of the commercial, like great pictures of pasta being poured over wonderfully made, a sauce being poured over wonderfully made pasta, great scene, all that's great. It felt warm, it felt homey. And at the last scene, the camera comes back to her and in her accent, she says, food that makes you feel like everything's gonna be all right. And I said, oh my gosh, she got it. So I went just running through the house. Ah! Because storytelling is not about making you feel emotional, but you feel emotional when someone understands what you're feeling. And when she said at the last line, food that makes you feel like everything's gonna be all right. She wouldn't have said that in 2018. There was no need. So when you're telling a story, a lot of it has nothing to do with the thing that you're selling. It has to do with establishing a level of understanding with the person watching. So they say, man, he gets it. I wanna get her to design my home. I wanna hire them for that service or their product. And companies that used to just relegate this type of storytelling to Hollywood, the film industry, music industry, have now gone all in because what was Hollywood is now traditional Wall Street, Main Street America business. And if you're going to sell a product, storytelling is everything. Number 4, do you even understand storytelling? I don't want to be long today. Storytelling, what is a story? You're talking about writing your book, you're talking about telling your story. Do you know that when I ask my clients, whether they be enterprise or individuals, in our first session, to give me the definition of a story, it's amazing. These are brilliant individuals who have gone to our finest institutions around the world, who have studied, they have masters and PhDs, and they sit there with a blank stare because very few people have understood or have been forced to explain or give the purest definition of what is a story. You want to write a book about your story. What is it? People say, well, it's telling people what happened. Okay. But that's actually journalism. What is a story? Before you can write it, before you can tell it, before you can put it together for your business or your individual, what is it? This is what it is. A story is not what happened. A story is what happened because of what happened. If you get this down inside of you and understand that a story is what happened because of what happened, in other words, it is organizing and sharing the emotive consequences of life events. It is not sharing life's events. It is sharing the consequences of life's events. When you understand that, immediately your thought process, your mind, what does Oliver Wendell Holmes say? Paraphrasing, the mind exposed to a greater idea will never return to its original size. When you actually understand that it is what happened because of what happened, immediately your angle of copy, your angle of expressing yourself will never be on, I was born in Peoria, Illinois in 19, because you'll understand, no, that's a newscast. That's telling the what, when, where, how, why, who. I have to talk about what happened because I was born in Peoria, Illinois. I have to talk about not where I went to college, but what happened because I went to college. And you move your story further down the continuum of understanding because people don't want a recitation of the bullet points of your life. They want to understand the curvature of what happened around the corner from those events. They want to understand what it was like to grow up where you grew up and why and how you handled it. So a story by definition is not what happened. A story is what happened because of what happened. And understanding that piece alone is going to advance your storytelling for your book, how you should write it. It's going to give you the why you should write it. It's going to give you the angle of expression, because you're no longer going to write down events. You're going to write down the consequences of those events. Lastly, now that we understand storytelling a little better, and of course, we're doing a quick flyover here. Now that we understand the angle of expression, now that we understand what your book should be about, your personal and your professional life, now that we understand why you should write a book or copy or story for an enterprise or redo your entire marketing campaign to be story-based and not functionality and service-based, that we don't talk about the competency of our individual skills of our products and service because the world does not care. We establish the understanding component and they credit it back to us so they can get to know those other details on their own. How do we organize these ideas? I have created some years ago something called RSP, which stands for the Ross Story Path. The Ross Story Path. I had to do this because after 10,000 hours of interviewing authors and businesses over the past 2 decades, I had to find a way to take disjointed pieces of information and from them create one lucid message. Everyone who writes a book or everyone who puts together a marketing campaign, a presentation, a startup presentation wants to do one thing: inspire. Everyone wants to inspire someone. So I had to create a path that allows us to subject, into all of these pieces about a company. When you were 8 years old, when you were 20, when you were this amount of age, or when your company was just started in its infancy stage and how you grew it. How do we take all these pieces of 1,000 pieces and create one message? And the story path is what I did to do that. It is a 3-tier path of 7 points. In the last few minutes of our call today, I'm just going to go over tier 1, the top level of how to organize your ideas to end up at an inspirational outcome. Let me start in reverse. What is inspiration? To perspire is to sweat on the outside. To inspire is to sweat on the inside. And the wonderful thing about inspiration is it is a fire no one can see, so no one can put it out. Inspiration exists inside of us. And when people are inspired, they can accomplish great things. Not motivation, yeah, you can do it, but how do I do it? Inspiration is that quiet motivation, that quiet catalyst. And that is what we want to give as a gift to our listeners, our readers, our consumers, our clients, our partners. We want them to come around us and leave inspired, because every time they get around us, a fire is lit inside of them. Step number 1 of the story path: belief. We're talking about how to write a book. So I'm going to talk about it, not necessarily today from how we would use this in businesses, but we're going to talk about this, how we would use this when writing a book. Step 1, belief. What do you believe? And who taught you to believe that? Yeah. What is their name? What group? What organization? What school? What private entity poured concrete over your moral constitution and gave you a nearly unmovable foundation to take into the rest of your life? Number 2, trigger event. What was that event that stopped your life from trending in one direction and started a trend in another direction? What was that event? Invariably, people sit down with me and they say, well, there are several things that happened in my life that put me where I am. That is incorrect. What I have found is there is one primary thing that changed everything. And it takes a certain level of honesty, a certain level of candor to really identify that one thing. It's usually a birth, a death, a dysfunction, a molestation, a hiring, a firing, coming and going, a moving, an eviction, a foreclosure, a winning, a success, a level of a period of poverty, a period of wealth. There's something that has happened that is responsible for everything else that happened. We'll move on because we could stay there. Step 3, conflict of belief. This is the stage in your life when you come in contradiction with everything you were taught in stage 1. You were taught to believe X, Y, Z. And in stage 3, you find out that those who loved you didn't really give you all the truth you needed. And so in step 3, you learn to separate good people from bad information. In step 3, conflict of belief, it is talking about how you separated good people from bad information and had to learn how to live peaceably with those who were sincere but sincerely wrong. Ooh, I want to say this so bad, but let's keep going. Step 4, adaptation. There was a time in our life when we could travel down the highway 70 miles an hour with no seatbelt on because there was no seatbelt law. And then the law was passed. And all of a sudden, we had to adapt to a new reality, a new requirement, which takes us to step 5, adjustment. When you accept a new reality, you must then adjust to it so that you can live comfortably with the new reality. The seatbelt law is passed, and now I must adjust for this material to come across my chest every time I get into my car. Accepting new reality, adjusting to the new reality takes us to step 6, which is transformation. You start to become a different person than those in step 1 planned for you to become. You start to transform into something they have never seen. And the problem with this area of transformation is you had no example of such a person growing up. No one in your family, your friend circle looked like this person, this thing, this individual, this personality. You have become, because you have accepted a new reality, you've made peace that you got information from people who loved you, but it was wrong. You've learned what your trigger event was. You have given homage to those who poured concrete over your moral constitution in step 1, and you have transformed into a new hybrid individual that no one knew you would become. When you tell your story along this path, and much of this is metaphor, obviously, for exactly how your story is told when we subject it to this pathway. When you do all of this in these 6 steps, you get to step 7, which is inspiration. You become an inspiration when you tell your story along this pathway. Why? Because a person reads, listens, views your story, and now can access all the wisdom of your travel without having to traverse the same path. A person is able to look at your story and learn about all of your mistakes and not have to make the same, but still access the wisdom gained from the mistakes. Inspiration and efficiency are synonymous. Did you know that? Inspiration and efficiency are synonymous because I can circumvent the time it took to learn what you learned. And I'm inspired because you have just made more efficient my pathway to success. Because if you say, hey, I dropped out of school in the 8th grade, and let me tell you what happened, I can read that and not drop out of school. I really like this guy's story. I'm not going to do that. If you tell me that you went to raise money and did it this particular way and it didn't work and you switched over here, then I don't have to try that way that didn't work. And I can go here. Inspiration is efficient. The most positive consequence of inspiration is efficiency because it allows you a shorter path to success. Are you going to make mistakes? Yes, just make new mistakes. So by reading your book and following your pathway, I'm able to access all of the wonderful gift of knowledge, wisdom, and the mistakes done and learned so that I can now forge a new path, having on my backpack all the wisdom from your old one. When you follow this pathway, when you understand why you should write a book, what you should write about, the importance of establishing an angle of expression, when you understand what story is and storytelling, and that's a whole different, we could talk for 5 hours about storytelling itself, but when you understand that a story is telling what happened because of what happened, and when you understand and you have some type of sequential path to organize your ideas, you have created a foundation on which you can build a great book, because you've just built a great story. There are many other things that we can talk about at some other time, which is the mechanics of storytelling, how we can talk about emotional misdirection, redirection, pairing the unpaired, what language is best used when telling your story. What is the difference between saying almost and saying nearly? They definitionally mean about the same thing. What is the emotive difference, the different thrust, the emotive voltage of using one word over another so that you push further into the understanding portion of a person's view of your story? So for the last 5 minutes, I just want to take comments or take questions because, man, I always run out of time. Let me give you my contact information. My number is 678-468-3782. Again, 678-468-3782. My email is info, I-N-F-O, @bookambittion.com. That's BOOKAMBITION.com. And you can reach me best through one of those methods. Give me your comments or give me any questions you have. And if you want to follow up with me and continue the conversation, if you want to work on any project you're working on, how do you tell the story to reach the masses? Because we didn't even discuss storytelling at scale. We didn't discuss the components of story that have to change when it goes from reaching 100 people to reaching 1 million people. All of those things are different elements of storytelling that you must understand from a crafting standpoint so you can speak to the masses, but everyone in the masses thinks you're speaking to them specifically. Give me your comments or your questions.
I just want to say thank you. There were some really powerful points and perspectives that you brought up in regards to storytelling and just sort of reframed some of the storytelling process. So yeah, that was really powerful.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Hazel. I appreciate you. Vanessa, do you have any questions or comments?
Sorry, I'm on mute. The dogs were barking. I actually cheated and knew what you were gonna. I saw your video where you talked about the definition of a story. So I was like, I know the answer to that one. But no, I think it was really good. I agree with the reframing that Hazel mentioned. We're actually doing a lot of reframing with my business now to really understand problems facing companies. So I think it was powerful as well. Thank you.
You are very welcome. Abu, any questions or comments?
No, thank you. I really appreciate this time. I share the sentiments by Vanessa and Hazel. This has been an education for me. We're always looking to grow and learn from experts like yourselves. So thank you. I will most likely give you a ding dong in the future as I embark on other projects. I do have something right now, but maybe a quick question. I have a talk that I'm meant to give in Europe. It's like a TED talk. Do you also work in projects like that?
Yes. I write. I'm a speech writer to several speakers. That is my academic background. So my academic background is actually public speaking and public rhetoric. So yes, I work with individuals on that all the time. Okay,
so I'll be connecting with you on that shortly then. Thank you.
You have a wonderful day and God bless you all and be safe.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.